I mean, I have no problem calling Jimmy Carter a Hamas lover. That doesn't bother me. No love lost there. I couldn't care less. But I never found. I never knew that there was even an issue. Were Catholics particularly hesitant about calling the IRA terrorists?
I spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, covered it assiduously. The answer is yes. Okay.
Well, were we attacked here by their supporters?
Were we attacked?
Right. That's the question.
Americans weren't. British were. The British Prime Minister was nearly killed.
Yeah, sure.
The Lord Mountbatten was killed. There were a great many people who were murdered outside of Ireland. And
so I would think that under those circumstances, in that time, in that place, the question of whose support for the IRA was perfectly legitimate. If it wasn't asked, it wasn't asked. If it was, it was. I assume it was.
The IRA could not have existed without American Catholic money.
Well, that's... I'm not... But how does that enter into anything? I don't applaud that. That's not the question.
I think, if I may, the gentleman, there is pointing to one of the difficulties in what we're expecting of Muslims, and I think not expecting of other people right now. And that is to be responsible for everything that your co-religionists or co-nationalists around the world have done. And I think that is very difficult to ask of anybody, and I think it's not fair to ask of people.
I don't see any evidence of it. I think when a guy says that he's here to heal wounds caused by terrorism, asking him direct questions about terrorism committed in the name of his faith, you couldn't conceive of a more legitimate question. It's not about holding one person responsible for a whole faith. It's a very specific question.
And I think
I don't walk up to Muslims randomly and ask them if they support Hamas. I don't know anyone who does.
I think it's totally legitimate if we could get the imam in this room to ask him for
good luck.
To ask him for more of an explanation of his views. That is entirely consistent. But we also have to recognize all the many statements and, more importantly, the actions that someone has done over many, many years that have pointed to a life that is not about promoting terrorism and, in fact, about promoting tolerance. And then you can make a judgment. We can all make judgments.
The quotes from Raouf that you adduced before about weaving compassion into the fabric of society and this whole thing, they're actually, contentless. They don't mean anything. The question, is Hamas a terrorist organization, has the benefit of meaning something. And he answered that one wrong.
I would like to ask the panelists to please stay on point with the questions that are being asked by the community. The points that have been made, that are being made right now, have already been established. Has your question been answered?
Not really.
I guess I object to the premise of the question, I guess. If the premise is that Muslims are being asked sort of willy-nilly to account for everything that every person in the world calling themselves a Muslim does, I don't think that's the case. I object to the premise.
Please. The premise of the question is the double standard that myself as a Muslim looked at as a suspect and responsible for the acts of some crazy people, assuming I have no opinion about Hamas. I hear about them in the media only. That's not inside the United States. And what I know from our own media, that Hamas does not operate anywhere else in the world except in that part. So why does it affect a mosque in Manhattan?
Is the question why it affects a mosque in Manhattan or why it affects you? I mean, I think you're wrong if you think people want to think that you do have something to do with the mosque. I don't think anyone does. There's a question as to why it affects a mosque in Manhattan. It's not even a mosque. By the way, that's another thing. Raouf is the first person to have billed this as a mosque, and now we all have to correct ourselves every time. But anyway,
please stay on point.
Sure. Yes. Why it affects a mosque in Manhattan is because the whole purpose of the undertaking was to heal wounds inflicted by Islamist terror. Any question directed toward the person heading that up to meet that to get closer to that end is legitimate.
I would make 2 points. Firstly, your point about Imam Rauf is a bit off because many other mosques across the country are being vehemently opposed. There are incidents of harassment all over the country, and I don't believe that the persons involved in those mosques have made any statements similar to what Imam Faisal has made, in part because they really haven't been under media scrutiny. Those have just been local communities that have existed very comfortably in their context and that have received a tremendous amount of basically external pushback, not from their neighbors, in a coordinated campaign, in a coordinated opposition. In Tennessee, in Wisconsin, in California, in 2 places in California, there have been problems in Wyoming. I mean, I've been talking to people all over the country, so it's certainly not the case that it's simply Imam Faisal and it's an isolated incident. Secondly, the point that there is a double standard. Every group gets unfairly tarnished at some stage. The question is, why are we tarnishing one group in one way and not another? To the question of Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization. What else is Salafism is America's greatest ally in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia would not exist as a country were it not for us. So the point is, why are Muslims
I have no problem denouncing that policy, by the way.
Okay, but my point is that why are Muslims being asked to apologize for things that they have nothing to do with? I think that, well, this is why I'm saying, why are mosques getting opposed all over the country? They have nothing to do with this.
If a mosques are getting opposed all over the country, I'm unaware of it. In all the intervening years since 9/11, the number of synagogue attacks, anti-Jewish attacks, anti-black attacks, hate crime motivated, dwarf the anti-Muslim attacks. They exist, yeah. There's always jerks, but you can't make the case statistically that Muslims are being singled out in America. There's no evidence for it.
That's not the case. That is the premise of this debate. In this dialogue, which is turning into a debate, is not to establish a right or a wrong perspective here, but to simply talk about what's happening in New York City communities around the building of mosques. Towards that end, are there any other questions from the community sitting here?
Hi, my name is Katie Gray Arkins. I'm a senior here at Wagner College, and thank you for being here tonight. So I want to get back to the irrational fear part. I'm just curious about, Rauf, when you just said the double standard about mosques not being built around the country, and I'm curious how standard Americans are supposed to be okay with not just the zoning, because I understand that if it's only a few blocks away and the members of the community voted for it, but coming from New Hampshire and riding the ferry every day, or the subway, and then there's terrorist threats for Americans abroad, how am I supposed to be okay coming back to New York and on 9/11 when I hold a memorial, the bells ring at 8:34, whatever the time was, and then the call to prayer is going off. So I think the issue is why exactly that point, and I do perhaps maybe have irrational fears for the extremists, and unfortunately it is directed towards all Muslims, but how can everyone in this room get over those irrational fears or the judgments we have for the fears?
Do you have a panelist you'd like to direct that question to?
Rauf is fine.
I'm not Rauf.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Definitely not, just so that I don't get 55,000 interviews and hate mail. I'm also wearing, I have protection in the room, so, just in case anybody's really angry.
Wait, I got an exclusive interview. This is
awesome. I actually did show up. I changed my face. I thought maybe that'd be something. It's like Face Off. I'm actually John Travolta. I'm about to make a really cool movie that nobody will watch. I'm not bitter. It's all good. Don't worry about it. I think, it is difficult, but I would ask you to keep in mind a couple things. When we talk about the phenomenon of extremist Muslims, most of the people they've killed are other Muslims. Muslims are as much, if not more, a target of extremism, of Islamic extremism globally than any other community. If you look at, my family's from Pakistan. Pakistan has been savaged by extremist Muslim groups. And within the United States as well, in New York City, Muslims died too on September 11th. My brother worked in that building. His subway was late, thank God. There were Muslims who died in that building. There were Muslims who died rescuing other people.